From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. A kid covered with eczema, a woman born tired, a soldier bedeviled by weight issues, another woman on a standard American diet, one with an eating disorder, and yet another with chronic strep. This is episode 500, and in honor of this milestone, we wanted to share some of your own stories with you of people who've changed their lives by incorporating real food and ancestral traditions. All of the aforementioned concerns were resolved thanks to people making shifts and taking steps to improve their health. You'll hear 7 stories in approximately 30 minutes. Most of the guests on today's episode are actually Weston A. Price Foundation chapter leaders, and they've benefited so much from the foundation's principles that they want to give back to their families and their communities and the world. You can find your own chapter leader, by the way, on our website, westonaprice.org. Today you'll hear from Saritah, Dunn, Janine Farzin, Kristen Files, Medea Galligan, and Erin Meschke. Juliana Fajardo was also an addition. Not every single one of these women is a chapter leader, but maybe one day they will be. We connected with these women in Orlando at the Wise Traditions Conference, and next year it's going to be in Salt Lake City. So stick close to find out more about that. And if you're just getting started with your Wise Traditions journey, just become a member with us. You can be a part of private member podcasts that we do, and you'll get the journal. Join hands with us. Go to our website, westonaprice.org, and click on Join Now. It's only $30 a year with the code POD10. And I know gym memberships that cost that much per month. $30 a year, use the code POD10. And welcome to the family. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Saritah.
Hello, Hilda. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're trying to get everybody's stories. Tell me a little bit about yours. I know it started when you were on duty with the military in Afghanistan.
Yep, I did 13 months in Afghanistan, and I had always been like on the line of being overweight in the military. And so then I was like, okay, sure, I'll eat less and that'll be fine. And I was running a ton and would get on the chow menu and get like chicken breasts and carrots, and that worked while I was there. And then I got home and then, gained 30 pounds. I was over 155 pounds, and I'm only 5 foot. You know how it is being short.
Yes, I do know.
Every little pound makes a difference. So I was like, okay, well, what can I do? And then I started learning about keto.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, keto. So I started absorbing podcasts and learning about that. And every time I would listen to a keto podcast, I was like, oh, and the research of Dr. Weston Price. Oh, and Dr. Weston Price's research. And so I was like, Weston Price, okay. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay, well, let me find out more about that. And they're like, oh, I went to the website and I was like, oh, there's chapters. I'm like, what? There's chapters? I'm like, oh, Madison, Wisconsin. There's a chapter right in Madison, Wisconsin. What the heck? So I called my chapter leader and I said, all right, I'm sold. Give me some raw milk and let's do it. So that's kind of how it started.
And just to clarify, you don't have to become a member to go to a chapter. It's just like an organizing group that helps you find real food in your community, right?
Yeah, and the chapter leader who was present before I inherited the chapter, she had been a chapter leader for a long, long time. So she had been doing it and had a lot of community connections, and our farmer list is excellent. So it's really, really good.
Wow. And so what changes did you notice when you went from keto, let's say, to more of the Wise Traditions way?
So I know, like, when I started the keto journey, my body just changed rapidly. But I don't think it was as nutrient dense as I'm eating now. So when I started learning about Weston Price, I added in raw milk, and that's when I really started adding in organ meats and liver pate and, dabbling with like, okay, so if I'm not going to eat it every week, or if there's certain things I'm like, I don't know if I can get that, doing organ capsules, that kind of thing. So it sort of changed. And then my husband got more on board with like having more nutrient dense food. Like, oh, honey, let's buy a cow. So like, sorry, we need to buy a freezer. And then put a whole cow in it.
And
so,
he's like, sure. Well, speaking of your husband, I saw that you have a little baby.
Yeah, 3 months old.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Yep, she's a little Weston Price baby.
Well, and by that, I take it you mean you're nourishing yourself well and you're doing your best to have your breast milk be nutrient dense for the baby.
Definitely. Yep. That's been a high priority for me. So I know getting in the fats, definitely protein. You know, it actually takes more nutrients to breastfeed a baby than it does to gestate a baby. So I've been really focusing on that.
Not everybody knows that. They think you need to eat more when you're pregnant, but you actually need more nutrient density, more calories when you're breastfeeding. So let's just wrap up now with the question I love to pose at the end. If the listener could just do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they
do? Take one thing out of your pantry that you know is bad for you.
That's good. Just one thing.
Yep. Look at the shelf. Pick one thing you're like, you know what? That not nourishing me, not serving me. Get rid of it. Throw it away.
I love it. Thank you, Saritah. What a pleasure.
Gracias, Hilda.
Welcome to Wise Traditions, Corey.
Thanks, Hilda.
So I know a little bit about your story because we're friends.
Yep.
But you're also a co-chapter leader. So I wanted to ask you to tell the world, what was it that precipitated your finding the Weston A. Price Foundation? What was going on health-wise with your family?
So when my second baby was born, she had eczema all over her body. And we kind of went down the traditional wellness doctor path for about 6 months and realized it wasn't doing anything. It was making things maybe worse. And thankfully, my mom had already read Sally's book. And so she said, you know what? I think you should try cutting out gluten and you should try cutting out dairy. So we did that, and her body cleared up completely. And I'm telling you, she had eczema from her neck down all the way to her ankles.
Oh my gosh.
And it was gone within a week. So that kind of, put a light bulb in my brain, and I went, there's something to what we're eating, and it doesn't just have to do with weight. Because I, before that, had just kind of, food went to weight, and it didn't really affect anything else. But that, really shifted my mindset.
It's like you realized what Hippocrates said so many years ago, let thy food be thy medicine.
Yep.
It literally was for your daughter.
Yeah, 100%.
And then what other shifts did you make?
So then, I was a young mom at that point. I had 2 babies. I sort of was slowly making changes. We went paleo for a while. And then by the time I had my 3rd baby, I had actually read Nourishing Traditions. So I myself had read it, and I started incorporating, we drove across the state line to buy raw milk. I started taking frozen liver pills, where you cut the liver up really tiny. And then I took fermented cod liver oil, and I had such a beautiful, healthy baby because I was doing that through my pregnancy.
Yes.
And then I had another baby, same thing. She was just so healthy and so beautiful. And then it's just kind of every year or every 6 months or whenever I felt comfortable, I would just add more things and more things and more things into our lifestyle.
How does that work when you've got 4 kids? You're a busy mom. You're homeschooling too.
Yeah.
You've got a podcast of your own. How do you manage it all? Is it hard to feed them this nutrient-dense food consistently?
Sometimes. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. It's more work.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point, where it's mostly normal for us. But I've been doing it for years. So I don't think it's something that is very easy to do in a heartbeat, but I think it's something that's worth working towards.
Right. And it's like more often than not, you're kind of stacking your hacks over time. You're building that into your kind of schedule to go get the raw milk and to, this is how we do it. I've seen your meal planning stuff on Instagram and stuff. So that's fabulous. I'm so happy for you and your family.
Yeah, thank you.
And that your second is now eczema free.
Yeah.
So I want to pose to you now the question I like to pose at the end of the podcast. If the listener could just do one thing, Corey, just one thing to improve their health or their family's health, what would you recommend that they do?
I think when I was on the podcast the last time, I think I said cook from scratch. And I think that's probably, I'm going to stick with that one.
You're going to stick with that?
I'm going to stick with it because I think that if you're cooking at home from scratch, you're already doing way more than most Americans are doing. And When you're cooking at home, you get to choose the ingredients. So it's easy to avoid those things that don't align with your values.
Right, right. And you're putting in that extra vitamin, L for love.
Yes,
that's what
L.
I say. Thank you so much, Corey. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time today.
Yep.
Welcome to Wise Traditions, Janine.
Thanks, Hilda.
So I know that your health wasn't perfect, and actually maybe it was far from perfect when you were in your teens. Tell me a little bit about what it was like.
Well, you know, the crazy thing is I actually thought, because I followed the standard American guidelines and I was really strict about low fat and things like that, I thought that I was healthy, but I was so tired all the time, and I had menstrual problems, and just I was often in pain, and I would get sick really easily. And one time I bumped into a chair and I actually broke my toe, like just from bumping into a chair. Like I just felt so fragile and weak.
Wow.
And yeah, so I really felt like that was normal.
When did you realize that it was common but not normal?
Oh, well, a friend of mine encouraged me to read Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. Told me about the book and said, you might be interested in this. And I did. I checked it out at the library. I read it cover to cover, and I realized that radiant health was our birthright. And
How old were you when that happened?
I had 2 kids. I was 32.
Because I just think that book, it's a little bit challenging. It was written by Dr. Weston A. Price
It's a
himself.
technical book.
Uh-huh.
It's a research tome.
Yeah, but you went for it.
I did. I checked it out at the library. I had 3 weeks before I had to return it. I didn't really think I would read it, but I started, and it was a page turner for me, at least. I just was really it's broken up into chapters, like different people groups that he visited, and every story was more compelling than the last. Like I just couldn't believe that this existed. It was true. I almost felt like I'd been lied to. Like that this was our birthright, and I didn't even know it was an option. That I thought that what I was experiencing was normal and healthy.
Because he talked about he talked about the vibrant health of the indigenous people groups that he came across, and they weren't eating the packaged processed foods.
No,
they were eating their traditional, local, seasonal, organic foods.
Right.
So what was the first shift you made after that?
Well, I really made all the shifts. I mean, I cleaned up my pantry, and I started driving and picking up raw milk. It was a several-hour drive. I was in Illinois at the time, and on-farm sales were legal, so I had to drive way out of the city to pick it up. But the thing that I took away from that book, like the thing I really internalized, was that every one of these cultures had sacred foods. And these were the foods that had the fat-soluble vitamins. And in some cultures, it might have been insects, because arthropods actually have these nutrients, and so insects do, but we don't eat those in our culture. I mean, we eat the sea insects like crab and lobster, but even now it's hard to get the whole thing. Like when you buy it, often the most nutrient-dense part has been removed. Like
Interesting.
Like if you buy crab, you can buy the crab legs, but it's very hard to get the tamale and like the actual shell. So what I perceived from my own understanding of this after reading it was that the organ meats were the most accessible sacred foods that I could access. And so I was all in. I just decided, I had no idea. I'd never eaten or cooked any of these foods before, but I decided that, we're going to eat organ meats every week starting today. And that was it.
What changes did you notice for your health and your energy?
Oh my gosh, everything changed for me. I had a sense immediately, like the first time I ate liver, that I didn't know the food. It tasted really bad to me. I really didn't have I was so nervous about it, and I sat down at the table by myself, and I cut the smallest little pieces, and I would just chew and chew and chew, and the taste was weird, and it was very fatty, and I hadn't been eating any fatty meats, and I could barely swallow it, actually. It was like, and so I would kind of chug it down with sparkling water, and maybe with some lemon or lime added to it. Like I really needed something to get me over that hurdle but I could really feel right away that I felt nourished at a deep, like cellular level. And so that's what brought me back for more, because I didn't like in the beginning, I did not like the flavor. Right. I did not like it at all, but I could feel that something was changing in my body and that I needed that food, I needed that energy. And so I was like, okay, like I also learned during this time that my grandma had served these foods every week of my mom's life.
Wow.
That she grew up eating nose to tail and had grown up eating liver, but hadn't served it to us because she didn't really like it herself. And so like wanted us to be American. She came from an immigrant family. So I really felt that, I would just do it the way my grandma did it. I would just serve it once a week. And so, and I was scared about it. I was nervous. It was hard. It was just so awkward and uncomfortable. I felt so squeamish even taking the meat out of the package because it doesn't have the same texture as like a steak or a chicken thigh or a chicken breast. So yeah, it was really awkward, but I could feel the difference, like really at a deep level. And that's what drew me back for more.
That's so beautiful. So you picked
So-
the tradition back up again that your mother
Yes.
kind of dropped.
Yes.
And now hopefully your kids will carry it on. I imagine they eat organ meats too.
They do. They were so young, they really didn't know any different at the time, and now it's just part of our family. So
And when did you find the foundation named after Weston A. Price?
honestly, it was not right away. I actually got to the end of the book, and on the very last page, it says like kept in print or published by the Price Pottinger Foundation, and I
Yeah.
looked them up, and I consumed all their resources, and I don't even know. I think it was actually a friend of mine, for like just by chance, maybe 6 months later, put a physical copy of Nourishing Traditions, Sally Fallon's book, in the mail and sent it to me. Like she had found this information at the same time I had. It was a friend of mine from college. Out of the blue, I hadn't talked to her in years. She mailed me this book. And
That's
she was
a
like,
big
I
deal.
felt like you needed this. And I was like, what is this? I know about like, not Francis Poncher, but Weston Price.
Yes.
And this is his namesake foundation. What is this?
That's so
And then
cool.
I think from then I was all in like after I read that book from the beginning. But
Well, yeah, and now I know
So-
you're all in because we've actually had you on the podcast talking about organ meats. I know you're a chapter leader. You really make a difference in this space. And I want to ask you now the question I like to pose at the end of the podcast, which you already know, but I'm curious what your answer would be. If the listener could just do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Absolutely nose to tail eating.
Yeah.
I think that right now we're really in a fad of like high protein,
Yes.
but muscle meat is not going to save you. And it really has to be balanced with all the connective tissue, and there's other amino acids that are in these other cuts, and they are very high in the organ meats, and they're very high in the bones and the bone broths, and tendons and ligaments, all these other cuts. And so if we can really seek those out from our local farmers, we both support them because they may not be as in high demand, and then also we nourish our bodies at the deepest level.
Right? And
So-
you don't waste a thing. So
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful
Yes,
too.
it also honors the animal.
Yep.
It's so much more sustainable. There are so many things that resonate
know.
with me, but it's really like how I feel. I mean, I really come back to it over and over again because when I drink broth every day, when I'm in that habit, like I feel it in my skin, I see it, I see it in my hair, so it's like things like that that kind of keep me going. And then like the liver, I do feel like we do eat liver pretty much every week, but if we might be out of town or something and we notice it, I feel like people are kind of like, we haven't had that in a long. I'm like, I know, I feel it too.
I've got to get back
So,
to
yeah,
it.
so we do. So we just stick with it and keep them in
love it.
rotation. I would definitely say nose to tail, find a way, bring it
Nose
home.
to tail. I love it. All right. Well, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Hilda.
Coming up, we hear the story of a woman who says she was simply born tired and how she has turned things around.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
PaleoValley. If you avoid meat for environmental reasons, you're going to love PaleoValley grass-fed and finished beef sticks. Every time you enjoy one of these beef sticks, you can feel confident that you're doing your part to put an end to inhumane factory farms that negatively impact the environment. Instead, the beef included in PaleoValley beef sticks come from small American-owned farms that practice rotational grazing, where farmers rotate the pastures in which their cows graze, so they aren't feeding on the same soil or forever depleting its nutrients and so forth. That means that these cows are grass-fed, pasture-raised, and are a part of regenerative agriculture that increases nutrient density for you, and it puts carbon back into the soil for the planet's health. There are regulatory issues actually that allow companies to claim grass-fed on the label as long as the cow was fed grass at some point, and American-made if the beef is packaged in the United States. But with PaleoValley, they can literally claim that their cows are 100% grass-fed and raised on American soil. True grass-fed beef contains more calcium, magnesium, potassium, zinc, phosphorus, beta-carotene, and iron than grain-fed beef. So go to paleovalley.com/wise to receive 15% off your first order. Again, that's paleovalley.com/wise and get 15% off your first order. American Blossom Linens. Sleep soundly and wake refreshed. Experience the soft, crisp quality feel of the American Blossom Linens heirloom chemical-free bedding. It's made completely in the United States, just like your sheets that your grandma had. ABL is made by a family-owned bedding manufacturer making products since 1899. Their cotton is grown in the USA and then spun, woven, finished, sewn, and packaged right here by your friends and neighbors. Check out ABL's sheets, towels, blankets, pillows, duvets, duvet inserts, baby blankets, crib sheets. They're all made in the U.S. from cotton and wool, natural fibers that greatly enhance your sleep experience. Foreign sheets made of synthetic fibers and filled with chemicals travel over 8,000 miles to get to you, which is no good for you or the environment. With over 2,500 five-star reviews, ABL's products are loved by many, including Angela and Shay from Homemaker Chic and Josh and Carolyn from Homesteading Family, and there is free shipping on everything. Order with confidence, knowing that you will have their 2-year happiness guarantee. If you are not happy with your purchase for any reason, simply return it for a full refund. Again, that's AmericanBlossomLinens.com and use the code WISE for 20% off today. Again, that's AmericanBlossomLinens.com and use the code WISE for 20% off. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Kristen.
Thanks for having me.
So we've been friends for a while, and I know that before you found the Weston A. Price Foundation, you were like super exhausted. Tell me more about that time of your life.
Yeah, I was tired all the time. So I was born tired, I raised kids tired, and then I overcame my tired. But it used to be anything I did, I had to take a nap. So if I went to the grocery store, it required a 3-hour nap to recover.
Oh my
basic
goodness.
tasks.
And so what did you do to try to pump up your adrenals or to heal yourself at that time?
Yeah, so first I went to conventional medicine, and that was a script, so it didn't work. 2 things. I think Weston Price Foundation was pivotal in my healing. So that ancestral wise traditions diet. But I came to this because of our dental health, which was really, really poor at the time. And then also I had a child, my 4th child, and we were weaning, and she could not drink formula. And so we brought raw milk into our lives, and that made a huge difference. And that was just kind of a snowball effect from there.
Oh my gosh. And so how did your family, as the older kids, how did they respond as you transitioned to a more nutrient-dense diet, more ancestrally aligned?
Yeah, they actually loved it because I was cooking real food. And so I was bursting with flavor, and carrots actually tasted good, and potatoes tasted good. And I remember my husband just complaining about the cost of a farm potato versus a Walmart potato. And one time I made baked potatoes. I was like, this is the best potato I've ever had in my life. Jeez, that's the farm potato you didn't want to pay for. So, yeah, I think real food made a difference. They loved it. They were totally on board. Raw milk, once you try it.
That's beautiful. I know I feel that way. All right, so now I have to close you the question I love to close at the end. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, and in your case it might have to do with fatigue, what would you recommend that they do to overcome that?
So usually I say taking ownership of your health, when I'm going to go a little bit further and say eat living foods. So if you could add in some ferments, some raw milk, some good quality meats, I think those things can go a long way. And focusing maybe first on what you can add into your diet, because I feel like that's a little bit easier for people than cutting everything out of their diet.
Oh, I like that. Kind of adding in, it'll crowd out the other stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Thanks, Kristen.
No problem.
Welcome to Wise Traditions, Medea.
Thank you so much, Hilda. I'm so happy to be here, and what a great experience.
It's so fun. We're at the conference together, and I heard you say that you feel like you're healthier at 58 than you were at 28. Can you explain?
Yes, absolutely. Well, knowledge is power, right? So when, after growing up in the 80s and dieting, and you can't be too thin, and kind of having a difficult time through high school and college, like a lot of young women with dieting and eating disorder, which I will say a lot of people have struggled, especially women, and there's men too. And when I finally came out of that, and I was very severely depressed for a lot of years too, and I was a pre-med student at college, and I really wanted to understand, how does the body heal? How does food become medicine? And
so somehow as a pre-med major, you still didn't link those two?
Well, because that's not what they were teaching me, right? So you're studying for the MCAT, you're memorizing and you're regurgitating, but you're not really learning. What I learn now is anatomy and physiology. How does the body work? How does the pH of the stomach affect the release of bile from the gallbladder, right? How does the intestines take food, digest it, and allow the body to absorb and get nourished? So we are healthy. So over the last 40 years, these are the things I've learned for myself and that I teach. And
you were telling me that you have very practical ways in which you help your clients and others understand that real food can be delicious and nutrient dense. And so I want to ask you, when did you come across the Weston A. Price Foundation?
So after I got a degree, I ended up doing environmental science at a pre-med. I said, I can't go down that path. I want to know really how preventative medicine works. It wasn't available in the 80s. And I spent time in South America as a Peace Corps volunteer seeing people who were 100, chopping wood first thing in the morning, healthy, functional people living in very rural environments. So that was a real learning experience. When I came back and I started my family, I ended up getting a master's in nutrition and moved to South Florida. I remember leaving Nutrition World in West Palm Beach as a new functional medicine nutritionist, or at that time I was doing holistic nutrition, and seeing a pamphlet that said soy alert. Okay, and this was at the time when early 2000s, you couldn't get enough soy. Right? Remember
on the soy.
Bars, there was TVP. Textured vegetable protein, right? Meat, we want to get away from meat's bad, it's causing heart disease, we were told. And soy's good. Hot flashes, soy is good. You know, soy milk, soy bars. And I see this thing that has soy alert with an X through it. And I was like, this is what was so great. It let me open my mind when we're learning about science and health and nutrition, not to confirm what we already think is true, but be open to new perspectives and new information. And that's what was most interesting. And I was like, wow, I didn't know the importance of fermentation and that there's a huge difference between fermented soy and unfermented soy.
That's true, yes.
And so, miso, natto, and tempeh being the only forms of fermented soy, and how those are really beneficial for us. But of course, soy milk and soy oil and all this stuff is not helping us. So, and creating hormonal imbalance. So that was my introduction. From then I joined Weston A. Price. And I had the information. I've been using it with for myself and with my clients for years, educating them about the importance of cholesterol, the truth about heart disease. It's one of my main resources about mental health, about depression and anxiety really coming from the gut.
Yes, so many things. And you know, we have Wise Traditions podcast on all those subjects. We did a recent series this past summer on high cholesterol. We've interviewed Dr. Kelly Brogan about depression. So I'm really glad that you found the foundation and that you've had that open mind about exploring different things. Now I want to pose to you, Medea, the question I like to pose at the end of the podcast. If the listener could just do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
I think tuning into your podcast. I think going to Weston A. Price. I think I am a chapter leader in Naples, Florida. I had started a chapter back in 2011 in Burnsville, North Carolina first. I think finding your chapter leader, using the resources, learning about the power of real food, of fermentation, of bone broth. And when we eat better, we feel better. And we're supporting the body and healing itself. So stop chasing symptoms, stop chasing Band-Aids, and really enjoy simple, healthy, easy, delicious, affordable food. And
Simple,
your life will
healthy,
change.
Easy, delicious. I like that. Thank
You
you
like
so
it?
much, Medea.
Thank you, Hilda.
Welcome to Wise Traditions, Erin.
Hi, Hilda. Thanks for having me.
So I've heard you say you grew up sick. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest, and I was on a standard American diet, which basically consisted of casseroles and sugar. And because of that and living in a moldy basement, I actually grew up with chronic strep. I had strep 4 to 6 times a year, which means I was constantly on antibiotics.
4 to 6 times a year?
Yeah, until my early 20s. And then when I graduated from college, my husband and I moved to Colorado, and the drier environment and not being in mold helped to alleviate a little bit of those problems, but the small food changes I was making a much bigger difference.
And how did you find out about the Weston A. Price Foundation?
So I didn't find out about the Weston A. Price Foundation until about 8 years ago. I was having some gut issues. I was listening to some summits, and you were interviewed on one of them.
Oh my God.
And then, so I found the podcast, and I blew through 300 episodes in like 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
Every time I was like, my kids would be at school, I would be cooking, I would be walking, I'd be running errands. I always had a podcast and listening through all of them. And I actually bought Sally's cookbook, the Nourishing Traditions cookbook, in the early 2000s, like probably within the first few years that it was released. But it was so overwhelming to me because of my background that it was kind of like a reference occasionally, but the recipes, I never had all the ingredients. It was like so overwhelming to think about how to make these nourishing, things. I thought it was a good cook because I could like reheat some pasta sauce and cook some noodles, and it tasted good, right? I had no idea about nutrient density. But when we fast forward a couple decades, I'm teaching a cooking class now that's all based on the wise traditions, ancestral ideas, and I'm a chapter leader, and I help people find raw milk and farms and other things like that. So it's completely transformed my health, my children's health. And I also hope the community around me, right?
Yes.
Because that's such a big deal.
So you're glowing now. So you were sick, and now it's come full circle. You are helping other people heal.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful. So now I want to ask you the question I love to pose at the end. If the listener could just do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
I mean, there is such a long list, and it can be so overwhelming, but I think one of the biggest things, it does start with nutrition. It does. That I guess that has to be, because I could say breathing and sleeping and all of these things, right? And proper movement, but the food is the piece that's at the root of all of it. You can't make these changes if your brain's not nourished. Right. You can't actually move forward if you're constantly sick and you don't have motivation. And so those are the things that the food is really, I think, where it starts, and everything else kind of falls in place afterwards.
Yes, food is foundational. Well, thank you, Erin. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Welcome to Wise Traditions, Juliana.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So you are a young mom, and you said that you started getting into this health space because you were curious about vaccinations. Tell me a little bit about that story.
I mean, I used to think that people who didn't vaccinate their kids were just dumb, really. Like, it's sorry, but like, why would you not give your kid like this life-saving thing? And then a friend of mine, my best friend, her baby was injured by a vaccine. And hearing her story, I was still really skeptical. My college roommate, her kid was also injured. And then 2 other friends, not serious injuries, but still injuries nonetheless. And that, I was like, all right, something's going on. And now like seeing like all the rising rates of like autism and chronic disease in children, I just got really curious. And if I had time to research like, what stroller should I get for my baby? And like, what's like the best car seat and all these things, I figured I should also research what's gonna go into my child's body.
Of course. Now, but how did your family react?
They're very like pro-Western medicine. Don't question the doctor. They think I'm crazy for not vaccinating my kid. When he was born, I received a lot of phone calls like, Huli, please vaccinate Wyatt. Like, this is not okay. Like, you need to protect him, the whole thing. And I was like, oh, thanks. We'll see. I'll talk to my husband about it. But like, that's it. Like, I didn't really want to give any details at first. And then as they like started sort of opening up a little bit, I've been sharing things. And now my mom is super on board with me. Like my uncle is kind of seeing the light there. And so I feel like they're like, it's shifting.
That's so exciting. And I think you said the podcast has been a tool for you too, right?
Yeah, 100%. I was telling you earlier, I was like in tears because it's just been so life-changing. All the information that you provide, the people that you interview, then finding the podcast in Spanish because my family all speaks Spanish. Oh, it's made all the difference because they can see, like they can hear for themselves this information, and it's not just me telling them. They're able to hear from experts that you interview or that Annette and Alberto interview.
Yes.
So yeah.
Because otherwise they could be like, well, that's Huli, she's saying her stuff, but now they can hear other people share it, and so it's changing their life. Tell me about your mom, for example.
Well, my mom loves butter. And butter has been demonized for years, and so she was really relieved to hear that butter was great for you. Because she slathers butter on everything. So that was one thing that was really exciting for her. She used to feed me liver actually when I was little.
Yeah.
And I used to hate it. And then growing up, I was like, oh, that was so dumb. Like, why would she feed me liver? And now I'm like, oh, thank you, Mom. Thanks for feeding me all the liver, because I'm sure it made a huge difference.
So all of this has helped you and your family embrace wise traditions.
100%. Yeah.
That's
I don't
so
think that we
beautiful.
would have found all of this information so like maybe quickly and accessible, I guess. And all like put together if it wasn't for the Weston A. Price Foundation and the Wise Traditions podcast. It just like makes it so easy. I could just listen to it when I'm in the car, you know, doing dishes or whatever. It's
That's the goal, is just to put it out there as a tool. And so now you have listened to the podcast. So I want to pose to you the question we love to pose at the end of the show. If the listener could just do one thing, or the viewer, if they could just do one thing to improve their health, Juli, and you know, we know you're just a mom, you know, you don't have to have all this health background, but what would you recommend that they do?
Go outside. I think that's one thing that's made a big difference in our lives as well.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get outside as much as we can. Lose the screens, go outside. That would be my message.
I love
it. And
it.
listen to Wise Traditions.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Our guests today were Saritah, Corey Dunn, Janine Farzin, Kristen Files, Medea Galligan, and Erin Meschke, and Juliana Fajardo. I'll put their websites and links to connect with them in the episode description. And I am Hilda Labrada Gore, the host and producer of this podcast on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for this episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a recent review from Apple Podcasts. Montero, California said, "Best ever. You do such a good job at keeping the interviews on track and real. It has changed my life. The content is relevant. You don't get confused by fads, diets, and crazy things. It's so Weston Price." Thank you so much for your review. It is so Weston Price because this is the Weston A. Price Foundation's podcast, Wise Traditions. I am happy to host and produce it on their behalf. And you too can rate and review our show. Simply go to Apple Podcasts, give us as many stars as you would like. Let the world know that this show is worth listening to. Every review makes a difference. And thank you so much for listening, my friend. Stay well, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.